Thank you so much for that introduction, and hello everyone. I hope you're having as wonderful a morning as I am. I'm really excited to be here in Zagreb, my first time, and you are just going to be a wonderful audience, I already know that. Quick note before we begin, I will, if nobody minds, just in case, put on some automatic subtitles. They're not perfect, but at least those who can't see can follow along. Who can't hear me as well can follow along. Another point to make, just a quick warning, this talk is going to have a little bit of audio going on, so be prepared. Before we begin, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Ramón. Don't worry about rolling the R, Ramón is fine too. I'm Hola Soy Milk on Twitter, which is a terrible joke. It means hello, I am milk. And I've posted the link to the slides there if you want to follow along on your device. And you might have seen on the website for the conference that I have a picture with my dog, and you're probably wondering, enough about you, can we see more pictures of the dog? Of course. This is Fiona. She's the love of my life, and she's got these eyes that judge you so much. I love this photo where she's watching my wife eat mango with a discerning look. Okay, that's enough. Let's get right into the thick of it. So let's talk about rhythm games, particularly rhythm video games. Now, quick show of hands or a jaunty point to the sky. Has anybody ever played Just Dance? Okay, a couple people. Let's try something a little more recent. Has anybody played Beat Saber? Yeah, I tried this recently. It is super cool. You wear VR goggles and you slice these boxes with these lightsabers. But I'm a little more old school myself, and back when I was a child, the game to beat was Dance Dance Revolution, which I'll be referring to as DDR from now on. So how about a show of hands? Anybody play DDR? Yeah, I got a couple here. Cool. As the GIF shows, you've got a mat on the floor. That is your controller. And these arrows are going up on the screen and telling you where to step at which time on the beat. Now, the graphics will probably show you, it's an old game. This was on PlayStation, no number. But it was a lot of fun and pretty challenging and a heck of a workout. Now, the music. Let's talk about the music for a second. It was, you have to bear in mind it was the late 90s, okay? Early 2000s. I'll show you a quick demo of what the music is like. All right, that's enough of that. It was a lot of fun and a bit low. So I used to have parties at my house where we would just buy some pizzas and drink a lot of soda and play DDR all night. We lived on the ground floor, so nobody cared. Now, I've been wanting to get into the game again recently, and so my wife and I, my wife had never played DDR before, I introduced it to her via an open source app on PC called Stepmania, which, sorry about that, through an open source app called Stepmania. Has anybody heard of it? Cool, I get to introduce you to it. So what this is DDR, but open source. You can put any song you want on it, put in the steps as you like, and you've got your own album, which is a lot of fun. So we've got our game, next we need our controller to play at home. And you can, to this day, still buy foam mats. So what these are controllers just like in the arcade, except being made of metal, they're made of foam. And they've got these little contacts on them that when you put pressure on them with your foot, you press a button. Now, the problem with that is that they tend to wear out after a few months of daily usage, which we gave it. So it became very common to see screens something like this. So we started looking into alternative controllers that we could use. Now, one thing we did is we looked at metallic mats, which you can buy online, but they are pretty expensive. So this is 2 metallic mats for $300. Now, you're probably thinking, oh, okay, that's a lot. But you can see that it's discounted from $900 on this webpage. And that's a lot of bones for wanting to play some DDR. So We left it aside, and after some time, we went to something in Vienna called Maker Faire. Do they have that here? Yeah? Right. Well, for those that don't know, Maker Faire is just a festival where people gather around and show off their tech, or you can buy pieces of hardware tech. They have workshops and stuff. It is a lot of fun. So whilst I was there, I was introduced to something called conductive paint. Now, I had seen this before. What it is paint that carries a charge in a circuit. So I saw some videos on YouTube or something where you could like paint a circuit between a battery and a light bulb, and it would work. And I thought, yeah, that's pretty cool. What I did not know is, as you can see in this picture, it's also capacitative, which means you can press it, you can touch it with your capacitative body, and it'll carry a charge and then send a signal. So what you see here is a little piano connected to a device connected onto a Raspberry Pi and a little speaker. And then you can play a little tune. Now, the Raspberry Pi is something that I was familiar with before. I had one or two lying around that I used for watching movies at home. And so I had one or two lying around. And if you don't know them, this is the Raspberry Pi Zero you're looking at here. This is a fully functional Linux computer that costs about $5. $10 if you want Wi-Fi. What? So I looked at this thing and I went, I could do something with this. I did some research. I found out that they have an NPM package that you can install onto your Raspberry Pi and code it. And look, it even comes with a piece of code that I can copy and paste and get started. So I looked at that and I thought, this is going somewhere. I took another look at Stepmania, and I saw that you can customize the controls of the game. So I thought, how about we take a Raspberry Pi, some of the paint, the little hat that you put onto the Raspberry Pi, a yoga mat, and a little Node.js, and make our own dance mat. Did we make it? Yes, we did. Lo and behold, Project Dance Mat was born. Now, something to bear in mind is that this was my first ever hardware project. I've been making web apps for a few years. I've been making some macOS apps for a few years, but hardware, completely new to me. And so I jumped right in. And so my wife and I, we drew up a battle plan. We said, okay, here's how it's gonna look. You've got your dance mat with the Raspberry Pi. You plug it into the computer says, this is a keyboard. And then when you press the paint buttons on the mat, it'll send a keyboard signal over to the computer, which it will recognize as a dance move. Cool. So I took the nicely provided code from the NPM package. I set both a touch and a release threshold. That's the sensitivity with which, how close you can be in order for the Pi to recognize the touch of the paint. And then there's the big part that says send data to PC, which is where the bulk of this talk will go into. Now, once I did that, I plugged my Raspberry Pi to my PC, and hey, wouldn't you know it, just because I plugged it into a USB port, the computer doesn't immediately go, this is a keyboard. Now you're probably thinking, Ramón, did you not do any research? And I'm like, hold on, may I remind you this is my first time doing something like this? So I looked into it. Now, I did find out that there is a way to have a Raspberry Pi be recognizable as a USB keyboard. Now, this sounds daunting, but I had to write a kernel extension to Linux that tells the computer, hey, I'm a USB keyboard. Fortunately, I'm not the first to do it. And there are really nice tutorials out there that, my favorite part, had a big chunk of code that I could copy-paste and run this bash script when the Raspberry Pi boots up. Now, don't worry too much about the code here. The most important part is this one here. This one here says, when you plug your Raspberry Pi into the computer, it says what kind of device this is, who is the manufacturer, yours truly, and what kind of device it is. So I put that into my Raspberry Pi. I set it up so that it runs when the Raspberry Pi starts up. I plugged it into my PC, and the most amazing sound came from my computer. It went something like this. Doo-doo-doo-doo. And it recognized my Raspberry Pi keyboard. Cool, all right. Next up, I need to figure out how to actually interface between the Raspberry Pi and the USB signal. Now, this is my first time again doing something like this, so I went on the official USB website. I looked up the Human Interface Devices Information site. I downloaded a 300 megabyte PDF. I started reading it, and you know what basset hounds are, right? Those big dogs that when they bark, like I made the sound that one of those dogs make when they bark. It was something like, oof. It's a lot to read. But I did find out eventually what I needed to do. See, when a USB keyboard sends a signal, what is actually happening is it's sending a byte array of 8 hexadecimal codes. Each hexadecimal code represents each key that you press. So I looked up a list of it. There's our USB hexadecimal codes. I put that into my script. Lo and behold, if you press left, the computer says, aha, A has been pressed, and so on. This is really exciting. I was so thrilled that I would have eventually a programmable keyboard. So, now we begin sending data to the PC. You see, first, we need to, when this device underneath the Raspberry Pi gets some data, it will take from it which electrodes have been pressed on the device, and we need to parse from them which key corresponds to which electrode. Once I've done that, I need to actually build an 8-member-long array of keystrokes. So first 2 are blank, and then we've got up to 6 keys that have been pressed, which is fine. You might be wondering, why are you worried about many keys being pressed at once? You see, in DDR, it is super common to have moves that are like 2, 2, 2, and so on. So I needed to take that into account. Once I'd done that, I was able to boot up this script on my Raspberry Pi, you see those little circular parts at the top of the hat? Those are the ones that I could press, and then it would tell me which keys are being pressed, which is cool, but now we need to create a byte array and send it over to the USB device. Fortunately, documentation exists, and I was very quickly able to take this array and turn it into a byte array. Cool. Now we need to actually send the keystroke. And this was a part where I kind of went like, okay, let's do this. I didn't know how. After remembering some of my university work and talking to some fellow hardware developers, I needed to send something via the USB file descriptor. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar, in most Unix and Linux systems, file descriptors describe not only files, but also input and output devices, network sockets, and so on. So when you want to send data to a file, you just pipe data into that file. But you can do the same with network sockets and input and output devices. So I had, by running this script at the beginning of booting my Raspberry Pi, created a file descriptor that I could send hexadecimal data to, which is cool. And so I did some searching around, and wouldn't you know it, there's an NPM package that lets me do that, because there's an NPM package for everything. So I was able to use this Linux device NPM package to say, hey, I've got this file descriptor that I would like you to send data to. It takes 8-bit byte arrays. So once I had created that byte array, I was able to simply write that data into the device, which would in turn send the data over USB into my PC. But before testing it, very important, you have to be a good citizen and clean up after yourself. Once your script ends, you need to close the device. Very important. Next up, all I needed to do was run the command to start up my script. And what I did was I opened up a text editor on my PC, and I just started booping the buttons on the device. Wouldn't you know it, I'm writing text. This was tremendously exciting. I am now sending Now I've now sort of built the world's most useless keyboard. But, as my good friend Charlie says, useless is not worthless. So, then came the most fun part of all. We had to paint. So, this is, what you're seeing here is what we actually did the first time we made this device. So, at home, we bought a yoga mat from the corner store, and we just made some very hacky stencils and started getting to work. We even said, hey, there's enough electrodes on this device. Let's make a 2-player. Cool. Once we tried it out, we realized, wow, those 2 players are pretty close together. That can be hazardous. So we actually ended up cutting it in half. So we painted it, we connected it to the Raspberry Pi, then we connected the Raspberry Pi to our PC and started up StepMania. Now you're probably wondering, did it work? And I'm happy to say, yes, it did. Were we good at it? Kinda? I mean, we got D's, but hey, we hadn't done this in a while. Then the question comes, are we set for life? And honestly, that kind of depends on how you want to look at it. Let me do a quick computer enhance, please. Thank you. Who knew that putting paint on a yoga mat would eventually lead to the paint cracking? Well, through this experience, my wife and I started building what we like to call a if I could do it all over again list. You see, when I was talking to people about this project, they said, Ramon, why don't you use an Arduino? And I'm like, great question. Follow-up question, what is an Arduino? For those that don't know, Arduino is another kind of microcontroller that doesn't have a Linux runtime on it. We also found out that even though it's nice to be able to roll up your yoga mat and put it away, a smoother surface would be better for having this kind of dance mat. And while it is nice to be able to paint a cable directly into your Raspberry Pi hat, it turns out that it can be a little bit of a tight fit. I'm going to show you what I mean in a moment. So we ended up soldering some cables onto it. It became a little less fancy, but functional. Most importantly, we learned a whole bunch of stuff. Picture of my wife and I giving a thumbs up. Now you might be wondering, can you do it now? I'm happy to say yes, but before I do, I want to show you the first prototype that I built for showing off live on stage. This was the first prototype. You can see I was in a hurry and I didn't use a stencil, so it kind of looks like it doesn't look that nice. But you see, 5 minutes before I was due to go on stage, I was doing some last-minute tests, and some of the Raspberry Pi had gotten a little bit loose, and so I tried to fix it, and then 2 of the electrodes touched. So I tried to fix it. I tried to wipe it a little bit, and it just spread it around, and it kept getting worse and worse until when it came to give my talk in Vienna, I just had to hold up the Raspberry Pi and go, dee, 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 and it was terrible. However, I've got Mark II today. So this is what I've got here on stage. Computer, can you do a quick flip, please? Thank you. It's a pizza box. There's no magic going on here. All we have is some paint. So you've got your up, down, left, right arrows, and the cat means start. So let's do a live demo. First, I'm going to mirror my screen, and then let me just get StepMania here. All right. Would anybody like to come and volunteer to do some dancing for us? Quick caveat, it's with your hands, not with your feet. Please, can we give a round of applause for our brave volunteer? What is your name, person I've obviously never met before?
Yeah, that's me. I'm Tom.
Quick round of applause for Tom, please. All right, let's go with this song, since it's first on the list. Let me get the water away. Now, is easy difficulty okay with you, or would you prefer novice? That's a brave soul. So, whenever you're ready, press cat. Take it away, Tom. It is surprisingly hard with your hands. I think you need some encouragement. You got this.
F means the score is the highest one, right?
Absolutely. F is for fabulous. All right. Nearly done here. Once again, Tom, you killed it. Thank you. So, what I'm trying to get at here is, hardware hacking might look super daunting if you've never done it before, but it's a lot of fun. And you have the skills that you have leveraged through years or even months of doing software development that you can bring in. And you might even learn a thing or two that you can take out into the other world and apply it in your real work. It is a reminder of the importance of playing around with things. And there is a lot of support out there. People just love to help. So my main takeaway is, if you have an idea, and maybe it sounds a little goofy, just go for it. You never know what'll happen. Thanks, folks.